Welcome back to the Writers Craft Summit. In this session, I'm speaking with Ben Settle. Ben, welcome to the summit.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you having me on.
And just so everyone knows why they're looking at a phone image instead of your face, you're in an area where you don't have high-speed internet access at the moment. So it's a phone conversation that we're going to do for this session.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I should have warned you ahead of time, but yeah.
Oh yeah, no, that's all good. Let's. It's this is a writing conference. It's about the words, and so and I know you've got great information to share, and so I'm just thrilled to have you here.
Yeah, and let me be honest, I have a face made for writing anyway, so it's all good.
As many of us do. So, Ben, in this session, I was hoping to dig into the idea of being a productive writer and really writing fiction quickly and ideally prolifically. And I know that you told a story I've heard you tell a few times about Neil Gaiman and how Neil Gaiman broke into comics and how that influenced your approach to fiction writing, but also the copywriting work that you do. So I was wondering, maybe to kick things off, since everyone loves Neil Gaiman, maybe we could start with that story.
Okay, well, back in the 90s, the early 90s, I used to collect this magazine called Wizard Magazine for comic book collectors. And I don't know if they're even around anymore or whatever, but they used to interview all these guys. It was great. They interviewed comic book writers and artists and all that. Well, one of the interviews was with Neil Gaiman. And he was talking about how when he was in high school, the guidance counselor asked him, "So what do you want to be when you grow up?" And he goes, "Well, I want to write American comics," because he lives over there in Europe. And the guy looked at him like, "What? What does that mean?" And so he realized that when he graduated high school, he goes, "I need to learn about the publishing industry." So he got on the phone and he ended up selling like 2 unwritten articles he hadn't even written yet. And he said that was a great experience. And he said something kind of like offhand. He's like, "It's good for any new writer to write a couple 100,000 words under intense deadline pressure." And I cannot agree more. I mean, this is one of those things. It's kind of like throwing yourself into the deep end of the pool. When I was a kid, 6 years old or whatever, I was taking swimming lessons, and I remember I was like terrified of jumping into a pool, like the diving board. I think I even tried to like escape. I think I tried to like scale the fence and like get out of the swimming pool area or something. They caught me and then they just like threw me in there. And then I was like, and I'm like, actually, this is kind of fun. And then suddenly I was Mr. Diving Board. I loved it. Well, it's the same thing. A lot of people are so intimidated by writing. They want to have written, but they don't actually want to do the writing. Thing is, when you write a lot, and and I'll tell you how I applied this to my business. Writing becomes so easy. So I've written 7 novels. Not that this is not huge novels. Like these are really small novels. You could even say they're novellas. But I've written novels. I've written a lot of stuff. I've written tons. I tried daily emails. I've written tons of sales letters and informational books and all that. None of this is hard anymore because right around the end of 2010, exactly, I put a business plan together because I had been working with this one client for doing copywriting and emails and that sort of thing. And they had me on retainer. It was a great paying gig, actually. They paid me like a base every month and plus 1% of the company's sales. It was great. Except I hate doing client work. I really do. I hated doing client work. So I said, all right, what can I do by this time next year? So end of 2011. What could I do by end of 2011? Now, this is between Christmas and New Year's of 2010. I wrote this business plan. What can I do to be my own client by then and not beholden to client? So I put this business plan together based on a buddy of mine, what he had did, built this side business that made him like $70,000 a year, something like that, which is mostly article-based, easy and article-based. Now, it was a lot of gaming the system of SEO and all that, and it was very tactical, but it looked good. It looked like something I could do. So I quickly wrote an ebook for a niche for when people have prostate problems, actually. I wrote it. I started selling it. Using his system, that means I had to write like 1,000 e-zine articles, like literally 1,000 e-zine articles, plus 500 or 600 blog posts, plus about 100 autoresponder emails. This was in addition to doing my other stuff for clients and my bensettle.com site and all that, daily emails. Needless to say, for about a month and a half, I barely slept. All I did was write. Constantly writing to the point of exhaustion, and like where you're kind of in this weird, you don't know if you're in reality anymore. You're just like, you're almost like hallucinating through life just because you only sleep 2 or 3 hours a night on average. Well, long story short, I did that for about a month and a half, and I don't know, but I'm sure I wrote the equivalent of 2 novels worth of words. And I started seeing some sales in this little side business. I was like, great. So then I took a quick vacation, go visit my dad for about a week. Halfway through this vacation, Google decided to delist article sites. They call it slapping, and for good reason. But I mean, I'm not even mad at Google. I don't blame them. There's a lot of garbage article sites and all that. But all that work was for nothing. All of it. All that writing and not sleeping and sleepwalking through life for all that time, and all those thousands of 1,000+ articles I wrote and blog posts and all that, all for nothing. Except a funny thing happened. After that, writing an email a day, he was like, this is the easiest thing in the world. It's like writing does not intimidate me one way or another. It wasn't, right a couple years later, I started writing my first novel, and I said, this is like nothing. This is easy because I've already done all this writing under intense pressure and everything. It's like building up your muscles. It's like building up your muscles for like an Olympic level weightlifting, and then just having to go to the local gym and, do a couple curls with the bar. Well, it's like nothing now. So my point is the best way to get over any fear of writing, to be, the intimidation of writing, to get fast at writing, is to take Neil Gaiman's advice and just write a lot of words under intense deadlines, whether it's self-imposed deadlines or someone else's, and you will find that any other writing you do after that, whether it be fiction or nonfiction, is so much easier. I'm not saying like that writing craft gets easier, but the mechanical act of writing is not that hard. Ideas come a lot easier. I think it's because you're literally creating new neurological pathways in your brain, literally, that it's getting used to writing. So I don't know if that helps anyone, but that was huge for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's super helpful. I know so many writers who are really talented and who have great ideas, but the huge barrier that they're trying to get over is just that butt in seat problem, that habit formation that, you managed to kind of develop through this crazed writing process, this long-term sprint. Now, I understand that kind of approach of doing things in a focused period of time and in a bit of a sprint has carried over into your novel writing. You've written 6 or 7 novels now, you said. Could you speak a bit about your approach to novel writing? And I see so many writers who spend years working on a book. So I'd love to hear this idea of getting a book done in a few weeks or months.
Yeah. So, my primary business is I write emails, right? So I write email, usually 1 a day, sometimes more than that, but basically an email a day. I'm just used to writing. Like I recently moved in mid-March. This is why I have no internet right now, high speed, because they're trying to like install it. And those 2 weeks of getting situated, I was getting grumpy because I wasn't able to write. I didn't have time. I was like, this is bothering me. Like I miss writing. So my point is when you just start getting into a set schedule of writing, and I think everyone should, it should be the first hour of someone's day when they're at their most creative, they're at their best. Yet your most energy, give that to yourself. You deserve it. Give yourself that first hour before you give a boss or anyone else that time. And when it came to novels, I just treated each chapter like it was its own daily email. And so I wrote a chapter a day. Now, I'm really weird with this, what I'm about to say, so I admit this, but my novels, I have 7 novels, and I was kind of inspired by Anthony Burgess, the guy who wrote A Clockwork Orange. So I kind of got the idea from him in a weird way. Not that he taught this or anything, but I said 7 novels. Each novel's 14 chapters, and each chapter is 7 parts. 7 parts. So I would just write it takes me 14 days literally to write one of these novels. Sometimes it took less because sometimes I'd get into it and write another chapter at night or something. But basically, now when I say write them, I'm the kind of writer who I understand there's two types of writers. Like I'm not the Kurt Vonnegut kind of writer. Like when I write a sentence, it's not done. Like my first drafts are like basically an artist's sketch, and then I do most of the real heavy lifting during the editing phase. But that first draft is done very, very quickly. And then what I would do is I'd put it away for a few months and then edit it. And that was my process for all 7 books. And I'm actually going to be writing very soon a kind of a bonus book for the series of linked short stories. It'll be 14 short stories. Each one will be 7 parts. And I'm going to approach it the exact same way. In fact, I'm looking forward to it. It's not like something oh no, I got to write. No, I want to do this. I'm glad I'm going to finally have time to do it. I'm going to have fun doing it. And once you get over that intimidation factor, like, oh, writing. No, just, if it's fun to do, you'll have fun doing it. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. And the easier it gets, the more you want to do it. That's been my experience.
It's interesting, this idea of the 14 chapters and the 7 parts to each chapter and all of that. I've written about this before, this idea that I can barely add. Like I'm like dyslexic when it comes to numbers and math of any kind. And so I'm really drawn to literature and words because math is so confusing to me. And yet when it comes to figuring out things like how to break down a novel writing process, math can be really useful. I'm a big fan of tracking word counts. I'm a big fan of kind of doing the math of, how many days is there to deadline? How many days a week are we able to write? How many words are we able to get done in that time? And it's just interesting for something that's so creative and so word focused. Math and numbers can be a tool to keep you focused as well as to kind of support your productivity as well as structure your ideas.
Oh, yeah. And there's another element to this that I think is missing from pretty much every writing resource I've ever seen. Not that I've seen them all by any means, but I'm just saying in general. So let's take a Stephen King versus G.R.R. Martin, for example. J.R.R. Martin might be the slowest writer who ever lived. Like he got lucky with his Game of Thrones. He'd be probably destitute right now if that hadn't done, because it's like a running joke. Even in The Onion, they did a joke. Well, he's finally getting ready to do the next book, and then they quote him. I made some tea. I'm getting ready. I just structured a chapter, and then I think in about 3 months I'll be ready to tackle this thing. He never does anything. He's probably gonna pass away by the time, that's his fans are really worried about. I'm not a huge fan of those stories, but I just like using this as an example. Stephen King, on the other hand, anyone who's read his stuff or read his On Writing book knows this, that he gets up, he writes 10 pages a day, no matter what, 7 days a week, disciplined himself to do that, and this guy just cranks out one book after another. There's a marketer named Dan Kennedy who does the same thing. In fact, every writer should get his book called No BS Time Management. I'm telling you, it'll keep you on track, not just for writing, but everything. And, he's very disciplined about it. Now, here's the point that I think everybody, I don't see this discussed. For the last couple of years, I've been studying personality typing. Now, this is not an exact science, what I'm about to say. And there are major flaws in all the personality systems. I'm the first to admit it. But my girlfriend for the last 2 years, she's now she just is obsessed with this kind. In fact, she created a whole business around learning how to type clients, so that you can more easily sell them and know who you're dealing with. She's literally talked people off ledges, basically from killing themselves using this talent. She's real big in the Myers-Briggs test. That's what she usually uses. But they all are pretty much similar on a lot of these things. They just have different terminology. So there's, in Myers-Briggs, and again, it's a flawed test. I'm not an advocate for it or anything. It's just the easiest one to what I'm about to say. It makes it more simple. You have P's and you have J's. J's are like me. It is I have to have a structured existence. I don't know how people can just float through life and all this and not have that. I have to be able to. I'm like a Stephen King. Like I guarantee he's a J in the system. He sits down, does it every day consistently, without excuse. Rain Sleeters. In fact, Dan Kennedy, who I mentioned in his No BS Time Management book, he starts one of the chapters out saying, "My mom's funeral is today, and here I am writing this chapter." It's not because I didn't love my mom or anything. It's just that I made a commitment to have the self-discipline to do this. No matter what happens, I write every day at this time. Now, that's a J. A P is the G.R. Martin types. You know, they have to find ways of dealing with their own, you know, how they deal with things. Neither one is better than the other, by the way. I'm just saying, like, the P personality has a harder time with this, with sitting down every day at this time. It's just they have to kind of almost game their way of thinking so they can do that in a way that works for them. Now, I don't have the answers for those types of people, but realizing it, if you're not the kind of person who likes to just, like, you need that, not because you need it because you won't do anything, but that you just have to do it that way. You have to have structure and order. I think it's like you're an advantage when it comes to getting things done. On the other hand, we're also a little bit less creative usually, and a little, you know, so there's a give and take. But by the way, I don't have answers for any of this stuff. I'm just opening up a discussion here for people to look more into it, because if you find out your personality is a P, this is why you're not doing anything. This is why you're putting it off. This is why you might have a creative spurt and you'll write a whole bunch one day, but then you won't do anything else for the next 3 months. And it's a real phenomenon, but if you understand how to use it to your advantage, you could get a lot done and do great things. That's my opinion on that.
Yeah, I think that's something that's come up throughout this summit. Everyone I speak to, including myself, we all have different approaches and advice that we give around writing, but at the same time, no one ever says this is the one way you have to do it. We all acknowledge that everyone comes at things a little differently. And so I think what you're alluding to here is something really important for people watching this summit, that they shouldn't be watching these videos to get the answers. They should be watching them to start identifying what type of writer they are. Are they a plot-focused writer, or are they a character-focused writer? Are they a J, or are they an S, as you said? Are they a Stephen King, or are they a George R. R. Martin type? It's about knowing who you are and how you function best.
That's the whole thing. I mean, a lot of it's just introspection and realizing what your strengths and weaknesses are, and not trying to be what you're not. Like I can tell you, my girlfriend, she can't function the way I do. I mean, it drives me nuts. I'm like, just do this, you know, do this, get up, and it's not how our brain works. So we've found ways of doing things for her so that she not only, it goes with her way of doing things, but she enjoys it more and she gets more done. So it's like a whole other thing, and it goes beyond just the mechanical craft of writing. It's a very much you know, it's more of a psychological thing, but it's something I don't see a lot of people talking about.
So I saw some advice that you gave recently that I thought was great. You said, in order to be a writer, you need to in order to be a successful writer, you need to, 1, write more words, 2, write those words faster. And then you said, notice I didn't say anything about talent. And I think that's really important. So can you expand on that a bit? What is this relationship between success, whether that's success building an audience or making sales? What's the relationship between that and speed and volume and talent?
Well, first thing to realize is there's a lot of very talented writers who are broke, die penniless. And they don't, but there's a lot of writers who've just gained the skill where it's not, like, I'm not a naturally talented writer by any means, but I have gained the skill that, you know, I'm able to use, that I can grow and make better. So most people listening, as I'm guessing, are not naturally talented writers, but they're learning the skill, which is perfectly okay. I mean, you know, it doesn't, either way you're fine. It's not a bad, like, there's no, don't get down on yourself if you weren't born, you know, with a typewriter in your hand. Like, that's, most people weren't. Most very successful, commercially successful writers weren't. So I'll give you 2 examples of what I was talking about with that. The first is Stan Lee. the late Stan Lee, the guy who created Spider-Man, the Hulk, basically all the main Marvel Comics characters. Now, he has a autobiography called Excelsior, which is really good. Like, if you're in writing, I think most writers would just love reading this. Reading autobiographies of any great writers is good. But he was talking about how for the first 20 years or something of his comic book career, he was spent just writing drivel he hated, like because his publisher and boss just followed trends. Like, that was it. He goes, let's see what's selling, and then let's flood the market with that until it changes. And I mean, there's something to be said about that business model, by the way. I mean, it does work. But he just was writing nonsense. He was writing just nonsensical stories. He wasn't able to write what he really wanted to. But he did it for 20 years. And during that time, he said, but he made good money. And he realized the more he wrote, the more money he was getting paid. And if he wanted to make more money, if he wanted to buy something for his wife or whatever, he just write more stories. Writers write. If you're a writer, you write. That's how, and as long as you have something that's that you can market or that's marketable, you can make money writing. The more writing you do, the more you'll make. Now, eventually he moved on and became Stan Lee, that we all know, because he broke his publisher's rules and did it his own way because he was going to quit anyway, and kind of like created the Fantastic Four and all that, and history was made. But those weren't functions of writing a lot, but just realized that he's the first to say, I was writing nonsense stories, but he was still making a great living writing nonsense. So that should give anybody a little bit of hope. The second example I want to tell you is Dan Kennedy, who I mentioned earlier. Now, he's a great marketing guy, and he is arguably the highest paid copywriter on the planet. Now, there are freelancers who might make more money in some ways, but he overall, I believe, is the highest paid. Now, he's the first to tell you, I am not a naturally talented writer. He's not the world's best copywriter by any means. What he says is, I'm the fastest writer. But he's the fastest writer. He can take more assignments, and he gets paid not just up front, but royalties and sales and all that. So the more writing he does, the more he makes, because he writes more than everyone else, and he writes faster. And he's the first to say, I'm just the fastest writer, copywriter, so I make the most. So it's not necessarily about talent. And this isn't a license to write nonsense. I'm just saying, if you have something that you're writing about that's people want to read and will pay for, whether it's as a job or for your own business or whatever, the more you write, the more you get paid. In my own business. Now, I'm very big into email writing. I have a bunch of products and services. I sell my own stuff. I sell things as an affiliate for certain other people. And I can tell you right now, when I do an affiliate campaign or a launch of a product, or even if I'm just promoting my paid newsletter at the end of the month, the more emails I write and send every day, the more money I make, hands down every time. Sometimes I'll send 4 to 7 emails in a day on the last day of a deadline. And I can tell you, the more of those emails I write, the more sales that come in. So writers write. If you're going to be a writer, you've got to start writing. And the more you write, the more you will make, as long as you are writing something that has a market and people want to buy it. And this goes for fiction, nonfiction, anything. Writers write. So write more and write faster and write more words, and you almost can't lose.
So if someone's watching this, they're like, that sounds good to me. I want to write more. I want to make more money. How do they write faster? Do you have any specific techniques or tips for, if I'm a writer who can currently get 400 words written an hour, how do I turn that into 800 or 1,000?
Oh man, I can't even, I can write 400 words in about 2 minutes. Really. And I'm not even exaggerating. To me, it's astounding. I can't even fathom spending that much time writing. So I think there's 2 types of writers, and I don't know what the terms are, but there's writers who, they write the sentence, it's done. They barely even edit, right? They don't have to. They're like, I don't know what the word is for that. And then there's writers like me, I just get it out as fast as possible, and I'll come back and edit it later. So if you want to write faster, get out of this like perfection mode that like every word has to be perfect. No, 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 no. Write like a crazed madman. Okay. Write like your life depends on it. Just get it out as fast as you can every day. Don't worry about word count. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Just say, okay, here's my goal to write a chapter a day, assuming it's a book or something. It could be an article, whatever it is you're writing. Write it fast and then go back and edit it and all that. Now, here's a trick that any writer can use. And I'm telling you that I have seen this work with so many people. It's not even, like, it's not debatable whether it works or not. One of the greatest copywriters who ever lived, his name was Eugene Schwartz. This guy wrote a tremendous amount of words. He wrote sales copy, for one thing, sales letter type stuff, like 30-page magalogs or whatever. He also wrote his own nonfiction books, and he wrote a lot of articles. He did that on purpose. He always had three things going at once. He said while he's working on one thing, he'd get ideas for the other, and that's a whole other thing in itself. But so this guy never had a writer's block, he said, ever. He never had any kind of block. He never has any trouble getting started. He simply has a kitchen timer, and he sets it for 33 minutes and 33 seconds, pushes start, and during that time, he's not allowed to do anything except write or sit there and do nothing. And eventually you start writing and all that. But that's only half of the tip I'm giving you. I mean, that's really good for not getting fatigued and all that, by the way. It's like write for 33 minutes and then take like a 5 or 10 minute break. And anyone who does that just like in 2 segments a day, an hour a day of writing will make you so prolific, because most writers don't write an hour a day. But if you did, you become super prolific, guaranteed. But here's the key. This goes back to another thing I learned from the great Dan Kennedy. You notice I'll probably keep dropping the same names over and over, but I just learn from these guys. He's famous for saying, and I don't think he invented this, but he's who I kind of learned the idea from. Some just say he did it. He says, work expands to fit the time allotted. So for example, if you give yourself 3 hours to write 400 words, it's going to take you 3 hours because you gave yourself that much time. I guarantee you, if you say, I have 14 minutes to write 400 words, or you're like, put yourself in this mindset like you were going to die a horrible death if you don't write 400 words in 14 minutes, you will find a way to do it. So work expands to fill the time allotted is huge. I have one of my customers was telling me this. He's like, gosh, I want to send an email a day. He goes, but it takes me like 3.5 hours. What can I do? And he basically asked me the same question you just did. And I said, look, I want you to give yourself exactly 29 minutes to write an email. That's it. That's all you got. And then he did that. He goes, Ben, that works. I only had 29 minutes. I figured it. You will figure it out. It's just how it goes. You got to almost trick your own brain, and that's one way to do it. You say, I have an hour to do this, and that's it. You will figure out how to wait. Your brain will get it done in that hour, and that's another function of just writing fast. Just get it all out. It doesn't have to be perfect. When an artist sketches something, they don't usually. Not every line is perfect. They sketch it, and I look at writing first draft as just a sketch. Don't hold back. Don't try to make it perfect. Just get your ideas out there. Like in making movies, they always say the movies aren't really made when they're shooting them. They're made in the editing bay. And I think it's the same thing with writing. At least that's the way I do it. I know there are people who do it, like C.S. Lewis, who just, he'd write one draft, from what I understand, and that was it. And he'd sit there with an ink, one of those quill pens, dip it in the thing, write a sentence. And it's exactly how he wanted it to be. Mozart was like that when he wrote his music. Every note was perfect. He never edited, never had to go back. But those guys were using a part of their subconscious that most people don't know how to access. I certainly don't. But, and they had a level of genius, I think, that most of us don't possess. But that's the key. Though, if you just say, I only have a certain amount of time to write this, then you will write it, because work will expand to fill the time allotted.
So something that I suspect people are going to say when they hear that is, but what if I don't know what to say? How do I come up with the ideas to fill the page in that time slot? And I know you have a pretty interesting technique involving dog walking. Could you speak to that a bit about the process of walking and getting out in nature and how that stimulates your thinking?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The more you write, the faster. Like, put it this way: ideas beget ideas. So the more ideas you get, the more other ideas you get. This is just it's something people just have to experience, and they'll just trust the process of how your brain works. Emails. I say emails beget emails. In other words, I write an email, suddenly I have ideas for 4 other emails. It's just action. There's this guy, Gary Halbert, another brilliant copywriter. He died several years ago. But he was big on saying, movement beats meditation every time. So what he would do, and what he recommend people do, if you're having trouble getting started, just write the word "the" over and over and over, and eventually you'll start thinking of something to say. He has this book called The Boron Letters, which was 24 or 25 letters he wrote by hand to his son while he was in federal prison, the Boron federal prison, for a crime he didn't even commit. He was just sent there. And so he was writing to his son about, success in direct marketing and copywriting, that sort of thing. And when you read these handwritten letters, he's even saying, I'm not even sure I'm going to write about today, but if I just keep moving, keep the pen moving, something will emerge. And I go, I got an idea. He just starts writing about it. So movement beats meditation every time. And I like to get out there and just walk my dog. Sometimes I walk my dog, but I also go on long walks by myself. And it's not necessarily the ideas. It's really just because I think it's a good idea to walk a lot. I did these 10-mile walks a few days a week. I can't stop my brain from working. It's like I constantly have to shoot videos and stuff and write myself notes. And, all I can tell you is there's something magical happens when you just move. When you move your body, when you get out and you don't just sit in a chair. And if you're going to sit in a chair, write something. Here's a trick. Just give yourself a goal of just writing the title, right? Here's my whole job for today. I'm going to write the title of this article or this book or whatever you're writing on. You're never going to just stop there. You're tricking your brain into giving yourself a goal that's so ridiculously easy that it's not going to want to stop there. And the author, best-selling author, and notice he's the first to admit he's a best-selling author, not a best-written author. Robert Kiyosaki talked about that. He did the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book series. And he stresses, notice that I said I'm a best-selling author, not a best-writing author, yet that's one of the highest-selling books ever created. And he talks about that. Sometimes you trick your brain. I've had people say, just write the copyright date. That's your whole goal for the entire day. Are you really only going to sit down and write the copyright date? No. It's just a way of tricking your brain, basically.
So you're touching on this idea of kind of goal setting here, and you have 2 books, your 2 villain books, and kind of a core concept in both of these. They're not part of your novel series; they're nonfiction kind of advice books. But you talk about the importance of having a mission. Could you speak to that and how that might play into a fiction author's productivity and ability to achieve the goals that they set for themselves?
Yeah, having a mission is everything. When you have a mission, something that just becomes your all-consuming desire, like you have to accomplish this thing. People tend to react to you differently. You react to other people differently. Suddenly, things that used to make you anxious, getting the approval of certain people and all that doesn't really matter anymore. If you were one of these people who always had to keep yourself accountable, that changes instantly. Now you're keeping other people accountable to you. There's a lot of things happen, but this is the whole thing with writing. A mission can be anything that just drives you. It should transcend you, ideally. So, like writing a novel to me isn't really a mission. Excuse me. It's there's nothing wrong with writing novels, obviously. I do, but for example, my novels are. I was talking to my publisher about this actually. When I say my publisher, this is not a mainstream publisher. It's my buddy who publishes my stuff on Amazon. Those books were never intended to just be like horror stories. There's an actual theme running through them, and it's almost like, it wasn't something I did just to do it. I had an overall plan for these books, and I still do. It's more of a mission than just writing the books. I want these books to actually accomplish a specific thing. And I can't really say what that is, because if someone ever wants to read the books, I don't want to ruin it for them. But it's more than just the writing.
Have you read the first book? I think there's probably is there a spiritual element that you're perhaps alluding to here?
There is. There's a spiritual. I mean, it's not like I'm trying to, I don't know how else to put this. My publisher calls it stealth evangelism. I don't know if that's really what I would call it. I mean, it's just telling the story about, for example, let's take the third book, for example, because the third book's the one I'm most proud of, actually. It's not the most popular, but it's like the one I'd let my mom read. The other ones I don't know. They're pretty dreamy. But, some of these books are written from a very immature place that I was in when I wrote them, so I can't really say much. But the third one gets into some very frightening, depending on who someone is, frightening and deep subjects of demonic activity. Now, nowhere in this book does it preach to anybody. I mean, that's like the thing. It's like you can't preach at people. Like, I'm just telling a story. But it's based on things I believe to be true. And I can tell you this, one person at least, and who knows, maybe I'll hear from more people one day, but one person has said, Ben, this book actually really helped me with a problem in that area, where she has, like, and I know this is probably going to lose like 90% of the people listening. That's okay. That's all right. The 10% of the people who don't get lost, they'll understand. But hopefully the point will be made anyway. I don't make anything up. I take it all out of the Bible. Like, here's what it says to do. If you're being, this is how you get rid of demons in your life, which I believe are very real entities. And, I believe this is a real thing. Well, she comes from a South American, lineage, where there's a lot of mixing religions and all that. And, it's her whole family has always experienced stuff. Her mom experiences stuff, this person, to this day, like weird stuff. And it just becomes something that some people just get used to, and they don't really, they just learn to live with it or whatever. She was having these problems. She said she did what one of the characters said to do in the book, and it has just stopped. It's never been a problem since. Now, that transcends me. That transcends, book sales, right? That transcends the whole thing. That's what I'm talking about when you have a mission. Like, you want to actually make something. It could be a goal. It doesn't have to be this. It could be anything. Having a mission could mean I want to have my own publishing company that publishes X, Y, Z types of books. It could be becoming an Olympic athlete could be a mission. The point is, when you find the mission, it can't be something that you intellectualize. That's the thing. And nobody can really tell you what that mission is. I don't know if you've ever seen The Matrix, but when he's talking to the Oracle, and she goes, being the one is kind of like being in love. You either are or you aren't. It is what it is. That's how it is when you find the right mission in life. You just know it. You don't think about other things. You don't get caught up with a lot of the minutiae. You probably just get right off social media altogether, I would guess, because none of that stuff matters anymore. There's this movie called Machine Gun Preacher, based on Sam Childers, who was a biker gang thug guy, heroin addict and all this, in prison and jail, converts to Christianity, goes over to Africa to help build homes, sees this kid, walk on a mine and basically get blown in half. And it completely changed everything. Suddenly his mission was to stop this evil guy, Joseph Kony, who is kind of irrelevant now, but for a long time, he was pretty much like the most evil man who probably ever walked the face of the earth. Taking these kids from villages and raping them and, setting them on fire in front of their parents and just evil. Like, it's just the evil personified. It became his mission to save these kids. So in order to do that, he had to build a ministry to fund it. So it's a real good example, his story, the movie or the autobiography, either way. It's a very good example of this idea of a mission. It just hit, like, after that, nothing else mattered. Even to the point where I think he probably messed up, because he would he would not pay the mortgage for his family to live in a house so he could just buy another pickup truck for the ministry over in Africa and all that. But so there's, you can take these things too far. I think you should take care of your family and everything. But, that's an example. And I know there's people right now who have missions, and you'll know it when you meet someone with a mission, because that's all they can talk about. Their war stories, this is what they thought. They bleed for their mission every day. They come home exhausted from working on it. It's what they talk about. They don't pedestalize anything else in life. They don't pedestalize a person or a job or anything else. This is their all-consuming thing. And it's amazing, because when you meet people who have this, you will just know it. They will have something about them that just makes you want to step aside and get out of their way or do something to help them achieve it. And I don't really know how to explain this beyond that, because I know it sounds very abstract, but that's what people should strive for. And if you don't know what your mission is, it may not have anything to do with writing, but maybe writing is a means to end for you to finance what your mission is. Who knows? And so, if you don't have a mission, your mission should be to find a mission. And when you find it, I'm telling you, everything changes overnight. So hopefully that's not too out there, but that's the way I look at it.
No, I think that's fabulous. I think whenever I'm working with authors, we always return to this idea of, yeah, we want to tell a story, but what is the story about? What is your view on the world? What are you trying? We always talk about stories being about change, about characters changing, but I think we also write books because we want to change our culture. We want to impact our readers. We want there to be some sort of switch that goes over in their head where they see the world just a little bit differently thanks to our writing. And so I think what you're talking about here, this idea of bringing your mission up above just, I have a mission to write a great book, but yeah, okay, great. But what's beyond that? What's the core of what's driving your art?
Absolutely. And there are people right now who I agree with them that there is a very real culture war going on. There's a war going on. I mean, anyone who looks around, you're going to have to take a side pretty soon. Pretty soon, no one's going to be able to sit on the sideline. You're on one side or the other. And so I know people personally who are building their own socio-political movements right now using the internet. And it's an absolute mission for them. It's not about enriching themselves. They want to stand up to what they think is wrong, and this is what they're doing. And a lot of them, in fact, the two people I'm thinking of they use writing primarily to do just that. I don't know. One of them, I know he wouldn't even call himself a writer, but he does a lot of writing to do what he's doing. So, yeah, I mean, it goes beyond just, I want to write a book. I mean, that's nice, but what do you want to do? What can that book do? Even from a business point of view, people write a book and they think, I wrote my book. Well, that book is just the beginning of the relationship with somebody. Someone buys your book, that should just be the beginning. I know a guy right now. I can't name any names here, by the way, because some of these guys are doing under, I'm under confidentiality and all that. They asked me not to. I know a guy right now, and I don't, I'm not taking sides in anything right now because I don't want to debate anybody on this stuff. But there's a guy right now who wants to help a specific author, an author who has done tremendous amount of research about vaccines and that sort of thing. Now, that's a raging controversy right now, right? Well, she's not very, she thinks her research based on other researchers and all that, she has a point of view that's not very friendly to the mainstream point of view. She's been kicked off Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, everything's deplatformed her. She's basically been unpersoned. I don't know how else to put it. This guy I know, who is a marketer, but he would not call himself necessarily a writer, but he is a great writer, is using his writing abilities and talent to help her circumvent all that and get her voice heard. That's a very real mission for this guy. But it goes beyond just that. He's also trying to help, he's trying to help do other things too in the name of changing things so that this doesn't happen to people, because it's happening to a lot of people right now. People might say, oh, that's good, but whatever. But this guy is totally at least doing, so he has a mission. And I've talked to him, and he has a real mission. He uses writing to get there. Does a lot of writing. Does a lot of videos and other stuff too. But it's all writing at the end of the day. And so there's another example that I'm trying to think of. There's just so few people who have missions. It's not like I can just keep popping these out. But those are a few examples of people I know who have.
Well, this is one of the reasons I wanted to get you on this summit, is because the cultural divide that you talked about. I think there's a lot of people, guests on this summit, who are probably on the opposite end of that divide than you are. And I think I'm probably hovering somewhere in the center. Though as a Canadian, you probably think I'm a crazy communist as a Canadian who, doesn't own guns and whatever. But one of the reasons I wanted
I actually don't have an opinion on where someone's at, because I know some Canadians who think just like me. I know Canadians who don't. I know, and I don't even look at it as a country thing. Like, I don't know how much time you spend in the United States, but the Eastern Seaboard is a completely different planet than like Middle America. So, you know what I mean? So I don't judge Canadians or anybody, because it's people, right?
Yeah.
The people are all individuals, and they all have their individual agendas and stuff. And what the media says about someone is not really very interesting to me, because in fact, if I hear anything in the mainstream media, I just assume it's bullcrap. I just assume it's a lie. I'm not saying that they're necessarily lying, but they're kind of guilty till proven innocent, because I see so much of it. So my point is, I don't necessarily think any of that about you. I don't know you. So
sure.
I wouldn't.
No. I mean, the point I wanted to get at was that for me, I find the writing that you do so compelling that I feel like it transcends any sort of culture binary war going on. And I really feel like if people can become better storytellers, better writers, to me, I think that's part of my mission, is that I feel like that war doesn't need to happen. I feel like we can cross that divide, and that we can all learn from each other via great storytelling and great writing. And, that was one of the reasons I wanted to make sure I got you on here.
Well, storytelling is one of the most, it's okay. So here's an interesting thing about storytelling. It's exactly, in my way of thinking, like a surgeon's scalpel. Okay. Great stories can be used to save people's lives, literally. To think about warning a kid away from doing something that they shouldn't do by telling a story about someone who did that and ended up dying or something. I know this one copywriter, she, to keep her kids away from drugs, she shows them YouTube videos of like these drug addicts who have no teeth, like talking about how they have to prostitute their bodies out just to eat, and subject themselves to all kinds of horrible things to keep their addiction fed. And it scares them. That's storytelling, right? So it can be used to do great things. Stories are the chief means by which human beings have communicated for thousands of years. They can be used to do great things. They can also be used to, a scalpel can also be used to stab someone in the eyeball, like kill somebody. And think of any of the most vicious propaganda machines that are ever around. Think of the old Soviet Union, or the old Nazi party and all that, like Hitler and all that, and Stalin, Lenin. Probably Joseph Kony, actually, who I mentioned earlier, the guy who was terrorizing all these kids in Africa. Stories is how they motivate people. There's a book out there written by Frank Capra, if you know who he is. He directed It's a Wonderful Life, and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and all that. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. He was very Lost Horizon, very popular director. He was pretty much instrumental in his filmmaking. The military recruited him to create films to motivate people to go to World War II, for better or worse. And I have my thoughts on World War II, but if they didn't go, nobody was really motivated to go, because it's like, why are we going to another country to spill blood and all that? We'd rather be here. And so he created these videos by taking the words of like Hitler and everything, like his own speeches, and turned them into documentaries, saying this is what he has planned for us. This is what he's doing. This is what he wants. You think it's going to stop there? And it was all storytelling. It was all editing and filmmaking, but it was telling a story. It was telling a narrative. So, for better or worse, stories can be used to absolutely alter people, change people's minds. Nothing will change minds better than a good story. Even just from a non like epic, like non-serious point of view, right? Like we're talking about bigger themes on this, but like in the copywriting world, people who sell in the financial niches, like they sell to investors and all that, nothing turns these investors on more than hearing a stock story, right? Like
right.
Once they hear a stock, that's what sells stocks. It's a story. And you ever seen the movie Top Gun?
Of course.
Okay, so I mean, we share this in common in our cultures, right? Like I'll say
we've all seen Top Gun for sure.
We've all seen Top Gun. So when that movie came out, which is a story, obviously it's a movie about a naval aviator pilot, who does this thing. He's flying. He gets the pretty girl. All this. He's got this like really cool life that a lot of guys would like to have. Well, that movie, that story, did such a good job of persuading people to want to be pilots, and it wasn't even trying to. Like as far as I know, it was not like government propaganda or anything. It was just a good, a fun movie. It did so well that so many people wanted to join the Navy and the Air Force that the armed forces were putting recruiting booths outside the theaters because the demand was so high from a story. And the sunglasses that Tom Cruise wore, some kind of, I forget what they were, but 30% they went up. The sales in that sunglasses, all because of the story. So, it doesn't have to be culture war stuff. It could be anything. But your storytelling, your stories matter. I told you about the person who, she said these bad things stopped happening to her because of the book. That's a story. That's not, if I'd lectured her on that, something, tried to preach to her or something, it wouldn't have mattered. She would have just ignored it. But in a story, it's totally different. Stories are very powerful. And once you understand the power of storytelling and you start telling stories and you see how it can actually change people's minds, it's a skill that you'll just never want to stop getting better at.
Absolutely. Yeah, we got a little dark here, so maybe to end on a happier note, here's another great quote from you that I really liked. You said, "If what you're writing isn't fun, then throw it out and write something that's fun. It should never feel like a chore if you're doing it right." So maybe to kind of wrap things up here, can you speak that a bit? I think a lot of people, I see them pulling out their hair, or there's that old quote of, writing is easy, you just sit at the keyboard and bleed or whatever. And I love this idea, right? That this should be a fun thing. So can you speak a bit about that as we wrap things up here?
Yeah, and I was mostly talking about daily emails to sell stuff with. To be able, you can't bore people into anything, right? Like you have to, and I have found, and not just for me, but with other people, that if you're not interested in what you're writing, how can you expect anyone else to be? So even if the word fun might make it sound like it has to be fun, how about just say entertaining? If it doesn't entertain you, chances are it's not going to entertain anybody else, and you should write something that does. I'll leave it with this. Director Mel Gibson, he was in this. Now he's done a few blockbuster movies, like he did Braveheart and Passion of the Christ. Like these are big selling movies. Apocalypto. These are giant. Like they were, considered blockbuster movies. And he was being interviewed. In fact, this was a Netflix series a while back. I don't think it's on anymore. But they interviewed like 30 different directors. So the recently departed John Singleton, for example, he just died this week actually. They interviewed him and they're very fascinating interviews, by the way, just from a storytelling perspective. Like I don't even know what it's called actually, so I couldn't even tell you what the series is called. But he said he says he follows his movies. His best-selling movies followed a very simple formula, which were 3 E's: entertain, educate, and elevate. Well, here's the thing. A lot of people want to educate and elevate people's thinking, which is great. Stories will do that. But without that first one, entertainment, no one's going to stick around to have their thinking elevated. So always be thinking entertainment, or as I like to call it, infotainment, which is mixing information with entertainment. And great writing is almost always infotaining in some ways. And entertaining does not mean funny necessarily. Storytelling is a very valid form of infotainment. It doesn't mean it's fun necessarily, but it's interesting and engaging and entertaining. And that is, you know, serious subjects, dark subjects can be very entertaining. Schindler's List, for example. That was a very high-selling movie from what I remember. And it was a story. It wasn't necessarily a fun story. Like, you don't think of it as fun, but it was an entertainment. It obviously entertained people. They wouldn't have paid money to go. People won't pay money, for example, to be depressed. So there was a, you know, everybody's read Of Mice and Men, the story of Mice and Men, which is like the most depressing story ever written. One of them. When that movie never does well when they make it into movies because nobody wants to pay $10 to be depressed, but they will pay money to be entertained. And writing has to be entertaining at the end of the day if you want anyone to read it. So that's what I meant by that.
Well, it's funny you say that you were referring to email writing there, because it instantly made me think of Zombie Cop. Because to me, it was like, you know, there's a funny quote you have in the acknowledgments where someone said that they were only going to read the parts without any violence or swearing or something, and you said, well, enjoy those 5 pages, right? And I just thought, you know, that's a fun book. That's a book where there's not a page where someone's head's not being torn off or someone's barfing or whatever. I mean, you know, the type of stuff that you go to for a monster book is there throughout. So I just thought that quote was a really great example of how in your fiction writing, you know, those are fun stories that you're telling, and the tropes and the elements that readers are looking for when they go to a horror action story, they're all there on every page and in every chapter.
That's what they're looking for, you know. I'm giving the market what they want, and I'm just doing it in a way that entertains me. But I write for myself. Ultimately, and this goes back to what I'm saying, if it doesn't entertain you, it's probably not going to entertain anybody else. And entertainment is not necessarily, you know, slapstick funny. It could be dark, but it has to enter. In fact, okay, you know, this might be a great way to end this interview. So we talk about Neil Gaiman. Well, in the Wizard magazine interview, well, there was another writer that was interviewed in one of those issues named Peter David, who was, you know, he was really instrumental in making the Incredible Hulk popular back in the late 80s and early 90s. And he said, you can write dark stuff, you can write even really depressing stuff, but it has to entertain or no one's going to read it. And I think that was a perfect, I should have led with that quote, but that was, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, but that's basically what he said. And it's very true.
I love it. Well, it all comes back full circle to comic books in Wizard magazine, which is something else that you and I both share. So, you know, speaking of infotainment, you know, I've certainly been entertained by this conversation, and I'm very confident the viewers are going to get a lot out of it. So, Ben, thank you so much for taking the time to join me on the Writers Craft Summit today and to speak about all the things we've covered, particularly how people can be more productive and can get more writing done faster.
Well, you're welcome. I appreciate you having me on. And, you know, if anybody wants to just read more of what my deranged stuff or my normal stuff or any stuff, they can at bensettle.com. And, you know, you don't even have to get on my email list. You can just read the blog if you want. But if you want more of what I'm up to, that's bensettle.com.